So we're going to talk today about Jasper Johns and our letter number designs, and specifically we want to look at color now. And here's an example of one of Jasper John's work, and there's color on his letters, and really interesting. But we want to look at how we use color. Do we just color it like we're doing a coloring book? Now I'm going to start in a very strange way, actually, to look at color. We're going to compare, and we're going to learn how we can use color in our designs, and how we can make numbers and letters look interesting by looking at how naval ships that were in the Navy were painted during World War I and World War II. So here's a ship here, and this is an unpainted ship, and you can kind of clearly see, its outlines and its smokestack. All right, unpainted ship, what most of us are used to. And here's one of Jasper John's work as well. And you can see there's all kinds of color. And you can sort of see an 8. You can sort of see, I think there's a 1 in there too. I think I see a 5 as well. All right. And we're going to look at how they paint these to learn how we're going to color ours. So one of the things is submarines, or what people call U-boats, during the war were sinking ships by staying hidden underwater and using their periscope, that long vertical thing that kind of pokes out of the water, to sink enemy ships from far away by firing these torpedoes. And then when they would hit them, the ship would obviously sink. And this is a view from their periscope here, right? So this is obviously not a good thing if you don't want your ship sunk and people lost, right? So to stay safe, these captains of the submarines or U-boats would stay as far away as possible, because the closer you got to your target, the easier you could see it, because the larger it was, but also they could see you as well, right? So it's hard to spot. The problem was it was hard to spot enemy ships far, far, far away because they would look really small, and it's hard to aim, right? So they would want to get close, but it's difficult. Now I've created sort of a pseudo image of a ship here. And this is the ship that's been painted. And if you were to see an image like this, here's the ship over here, here's the sea. If you were to see a ship like this, is it easy to tell how big or small the ship is, or whether it's one ship or more than 2 ships? Not quite so easy. And the reason for it is you'll notice that they've done something to the way it has been painted, right? It's not your normal gray. And if you go closer, you can sort of see, but then it almost looks like, you've got maybe, it almost looks like an island, actually. It looks like maybe there's one ship here, or maybe a ship in front of another ship. It's hard to tell how many ships there are. So imagine this is just a single ship, but imagine there's many of them and they all have this kind of like weird shape pattern to it. It's really hard to tell where the ship begins and ends, right? Because all you end up seeing are the shapes and not the actual outline of the ship. So you get a bit closer and you can start to see the outline of the ship, right? And then you get closer again and it's like, oh, that's what it actually looks like, right? And you can actually tell it's just a single ship and not several ships. Right. So the problem with getting so close like this is, you can see them clearly, but that means they can also clearly see you too. So it's not safe for you to be so close, right? And so these navies, and here's another closer shot, and you can clearly see, details on the ship now. But again, they can clearly and obviously know that you're there too. So it's not good for you to be so close. So these these navies would, as a way to kind of defend their ships in the oceans, they would paint their ships with all kinds of patterns using small shapes. And the idea was to camouflage their ships, right? So this is one that's not painted. And if you look at other ones, they've got triangles, right? Dark and light patterns. They've got these kind of weird kind of shapes to it here. They almost look like broken glass, actually. And this one has a lot to it, right? And the idea was, from far away, it would look something like that. Really hard to tell whether it was one ship 2 ships, 3 ships, or how far away the ships, or which ships were farther ahead or which ones were closer. So it was really hard to actually target them. So they would use this scattering kind of camouflage, right? Where they would break up these large masses of ships, right, into small random parts by making them look like small shapes. So it's intentionally meant to look a little bit like broken glass and broken, as if you've taken a plate and kind of smashed it against the ship, and these are the pieces you kind of see that are all broken. It's actually very intentional because this is much easier to kind of tell what it is, whereas this is much harder, right? So if we go back to Jasper Johns, he does the same thing, right? You can kind of tell what the numbers are here, so you can clearly see that 4 and the 5 now, and the 1, and I think there's a 0 as well. You can clearly see it here, right? Because you can still see the outlines, whereas here, when you start taking those broken up shapes and you break them up even more by painting them different colors, like this section here yellow, and this section here black, and this section here a combination of blue and red. You really camouflage the original letters and numbers, right? And that's kind of actually what he's doing. So we're going to do the same thing. This is our uncamouflaged, or just our line drawing, the basic design, right? There's the B and the G and the 9. But by choosing colors and applying them so that they break up the design even more, and by applying colors so that they reinforce the small shapes and not the big shapes, we're going to hide our letters and numbers. And that's one way we're going to make them interesting again. By hiding them, making them harder to find, it makes them kind of more mysterious, and it's going to make people want to look at them even more, because they're going to want to think, well, what is that? And, is there oh, it's a G. Oh, I get it now, right? So that's one way we're going to use, that's the way we're going to use color to make our work look even more interesting, our letters and numbers. All right, so even though you may have a hand-drawn version, doesn't really matter which one you use. I'm going to use the computer printout just because I think it looks better. And we're going to talk about colors and how we're going to use colors to make what are already interesting shapes look even more interesting. I'm going to ask you to limit yourself to 3 colors. So I've got blue, orange, and purple. And even within those colors, you can use a dark purple. You could use a orange marker, and you can use a dark blue as well. Now you might say, I don't have pencil crayons or markers at home. That's fine. Like I showed you, Jasper Johns used just black and white. So you could even use just a black and white graphite pencil. You can make dark and light tones using just a single pencil, right? And even if you had just one pencil crayon, even that you could still make work. You could because you can color some parts lighter, some parts darker, and you could make some really interesting shapes that way. Okay, so everybody should have at least one thing at home that they can use for this. Now, before we get to the coloring part, I do want to show you how another artist has painted Jasper Johns style numbers, just to kind of help us get some inspiration. All right, so I'm just going to show you that video.
Pop art Jasper Johns does it. In this Jasper Johns art lesson, I will use template painting to show you how I paint like Jasper Johns, numbers in color. Just after this. Hi there, my name is Albert van der Zwart. Welcome to A Perfect Paintings, where it's all about improving your painting skills by looking at art, yourself and the world around you. Jasper Johns is an American painter born in 1930. He often paints around a subject like flag, target or maps. An interesting video about one of his maps paintings, link above. And there are these Jasper Johns number paintings. By painting relative prosaic symbols,
Prosaic means practical, stuff you normally wouldn't see or think of as art, like a Campbell's soup can.
that are not usually the subject of high art, Jasper Johns challenges the viewer to see something new, look again, to question beliefs or opinions. Why not look a second time with a more curious rather than a complacent eye? Would you take a second look at a house number plate, a license plate, or a fire hydrant marker plate, again to appreciate the beauty of the numbers? We know our numbers 0 through 9, but we don't look at them unless they are Jasper Johns 0 through 9.
Now you'll notice he uses stencils. We didn't have stencils at home. Instead we used the word art tool.
I start with a simple but interesting exercise using templates and a pencil. To add some color, I partly go over the lines of the last added number with Lyra oil pastels.
So you'll see his numbers overlap, and the shapes end up making new shapes when they're one on top of each other. And you'll notice he outlines the shapes so you can see the shapes more clearly. And we'll do that as well. You can still sort of see the 2 there, and a little bit of the 3. I'm just going to skip ahead to another part to show you another technique of his.
Fingers from the cutting.
So there's a different one now where he traces it all first.
And do you use a black pencil or colored pencils?
So here he is making those shapes. He rotates them just like we did. Flips them. Now he uses shapes that are all the same size. We had the benefit of having a computer to be able to shrink them. You'll notice there he used part of the shape, not the entire 5. I don't know if that was a mistake or not. Oh yes it was. Haha. I'm just going to skip ahead a bit more. You'll notice when he colors this one, he only colors the edges. So that's another technique he uses. This artist uses. Some people use paint where they paint the background as well. Paint's obviously harder to do. If you have paint you can, but it's quite hard because our printouts are quite small. Alright. Okay, so now we're going to move back to our drawing. And I found some pencil crayons and some markers at home. I didn't have a whole lot actually. I just kind of dug around and found whatever my kids had at home. So there's and I'm gonna ask that you limit yourself to 3 or 4 colors maximum. I'm gonna use all warm colors for mine actually. Maybe I'll use a purple as well. So I'm gonna use a red, yellow, orange, and purple, 3 to 4 colors. You can also use a yellow marker and an orange marker if you want, just for a bit of variety. Makes it look more interesting. When you color, a couple of things are really important. So I'm going to set these aside. When you color, you want to make sure that when you color the shapes, it's okay if it's a little bit messy. Just don't make it like too scribbly, because it tends to look, it tends to ruin the shape. So the important thing is that when you color adjacent shapes, meaning shapes that are next to the ones you just colored, don't color them exactly the same. Try to avoid that. So in this case, you'll notice I'm still going to use a pencil crayon, but I'm going to do it much, much lighter. And what ends up happening is when you do it like that, you end up emphasizing each of those shapes those new shapes that they're created by all the overlapping. So again, I'm not going to use this one here. I'm going to switch now to maybe a yellow. Oops. So I'm going to switch to yellow. And you'll see that by switching colors, you end up emphasizing the shapes again. Just like that. And then I'm going to switch to a purple. Now, one thing I would recommend is when you're doing the large areas, like this part here in a moment, you kind of take your time, because most kids will tend to rush for those large areas because they just want to get it done. But when they do that, it tends to look really not that nice, and it ends up ruining it. So if you really must rush, I'm just going to turn this around to make it easier. What I would suggest you do is maybe use a marker instead. So I'm actually going to use a purple marker, and this one's a little bit darker, but I'm okay with that because everything else is kind of light so far. So you'll notice markers typically tend to look darker, so you really may want to just try out the marker first to see if it's too dark. Sharpies tend to look very dark as well, so just avoid using Sharpies unless you really must. There we go. So one of the tricks that I have for staying within the lines is sometimes what I'll do is I'll just outline first, like that. And that way I can color rapidly, meaning quickly, but not worry about going outside of the lines because I don't have to get too close to the lines. I've already done the lines. See how I can do that really quickly. And then what I'll do as well is for those long areas, I'll just kind of turn the paper so it's a bit easier to color that way. Okay. Now, I'm going to choose to leave this part here white because I think that's a really interesting shape that I want to stand out. So I'm not going to use purple here. I'm going to go back to orange, and I'm going to make this really, really bright. And I think I'm going to use a yellow marker for this. There we go. And I haven't quite used my, is this red? I haven't used my red yet, so I'm going to use the red. There we go. That. And I'm going to use my purple again. Oops. That's okay. Just a little bit's fine. There we go. So you'll see I haven't quite finished this yet, but it's already starting to look much more interesting than just the letter B, the number 6, or the letter G, right? So by laying the shapes on top of each other, you start to make it much more interesting, and you kind of get people intrigued about, what actually is that we're looking at. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and finish this, and I will see you at the end when we are done. So I'm just going to quickly do this. Now, if you're finding you're running out of colors, you might need to just, like I did, just shade lightly or leave them white as well. Because sometimes you will run out of colors and it's kind of like, uh-oh, what do I do now? I can only use 3 or 4 colors, but I've already used all the ones right next to mine. So keep that in mind. You can change the pressure to make it light or dark, okay? See you in a bit. All right, so we're all done here. You can kind of see this is the finished product. It's 4 colors, and you can still sort of see the B there, and you can still sort of see the G, but I'm just gonna turn it the way I originally had it. There we go, and that looks so much more interesting now. You get these really nice round shapes and these round shapes here, and you can't really recognize the G anymore. And because you've turned the B over to its side, it kind of looks really unusual that way. You get these nice curves like that. Okay, so you go ahead and do that with yours now, and I'm just going to put up the criteria that we're looking for, just to help remind you of what we're looking for to make an image look really good. Okay, so I hope you enjoy the activity. Okay, so here's just a reminder of some of the things we're looking to do. We want to make numbers beautiful again. We want to think about how we can lay out the numbers so that they're interesting and beautiful and not just numbers. You actually want to make them not look like numbers as much as possible, but still sort of be able to recognize them. I know that sounds strange, but you want a bit of both. You want to make the numbers shapes and lines recognizable, but again, not look just like literally a number. You want to make the numbers look like art and not look like a math book. Messy is okay. You saw in Jasper John's examples, he made it messy as well, but you could still see the shapes and the lines, and you can still recognize parts of the numbers. Use 3 to 4 colors maximum. You can use light and dark versions of that, and feel free to mix media as well. So you can use pastel, you can use paint, you can use pencil crayon, crayons, whatever you have at home is fine. Even just a regular pencil is fine. And when you're done, you want to take a photo of your finished artwork, and you can submit it in Google Classroom. And I'm just going to leave you with this last slide here, where there are some tips on how you might make it look interesting when you do it with color. So you might make it look very colorful. You might change the colors up. You might make it monotone, black and white, or just shades of red, dark red, light red, bright red, maybe just one color. When you're making your arrangement, you might zoom in on just one part. You might repeat it. You might actually hide it so you can't even see the edges. And you might even make it onto a bigger sheet of paper and paint the background as well. I didn't, but you could. And of course, we layered it. Okay, so I'll just leave this for you to look at and have fun. Okay, and can't wait to see your work when it's done.